And welcome to the inaugural episode of Bleav in Heels Hoops. You are all everything for North Carolina men's basketball for the season. I'm your host, Desmond Johnson, joined by the Tar Heel Tribune's R.L. Bynum. We'll be with you each week, giving you little updates on the Carolina basketball team, previews. We'll recap stuff that's happened previously before we get into those previews. And we'll probably have some former players, things of that sort on as well. Part of the Bleav podcast network. You can subscribe, rate to the podcast on any major podcast platform. Video wise, you can comment on the show live at youtube.com/@Tobacco Road Sports Radio. You'll be able to comment, ask questions to myself or RL throughout the show. Of course, today we're going to have the Kentucky preview Saturday, 5:30 p.m. on CBS and the CBS Sports Classic. And we'll get into that in just a bit. But first, RL, what's up, man? How you doing?
Not much. This should be fun. I always love talking Carolina basketball. I mean, I've followed the program since I was a little kid, going to games at Carmichael. My family had season tickets, so I've followed the program for quite a while. This will be my 9th season covering Carolina basketball, and the 4th covering the men's and the women's teams for a website I launched in 2020, Tar Heel Tribune. So it should be fun.
And we probably will as the season goes on. I don't want to completely ignore the ladies by any means. My goal when I first started this was to do it primarily on the men because that's primarily what I'll watch. But having you as an asset here and your coverage of the women's team, we probably will sprinkle in some women's hoops news as well because the women are doing pretty well. Let's jump into actually, you know what? Before we do the preview of the game on Saturday, let's actually get into something I thought that was pretty cool earlier this week at tarheeltribune.com. Everybody that's over can go over there and check this out, where RL put together his list of all-time top 10 Kentucky versus North Carolina games. You know, it's funny, I'm a lifelong Carolina fan myself, and usually when I think of Kentucky's rivals outside of the SEC, I think of Duke for some reason. It's like Duke, Kentucky, like those games, the Leitner game where he kicks the dude in the chest and goes perfect from the line, from the floor, and the shot at the end. And it's one of the classic college basketball games of all time. But we've got one in the chamber, too, with Kentucky. That's one of the classic basketball games of all time. But before we get to that one, give me 1 out of your 10. I want everybody to go over to the Tar Heel Tribune if you're a Carolina fan and check out this article before Saturday. But give me 1 out of the 10 besides the one we're going to talk about in a bit that stood out to you as you were telling me you were compiling this, and it was a lot of fun as you went through and grabbed all this stuff.
Well, I mean, I think the big controversial matchup was in the 1995 Southeast Regional, and a lot of younger fans might not even know about it. Rasheed Wallace swung an elbow into the face of Andre Riddick, a Kentucky player.
That's right. Yeah.
And Riddick responded by reaching for Rasheed's throat. And
that didn't sound like a good idea.
This did not go over well with Rasheed. There was a lot of pushing and shoving, and that could have gotten really ugly, but it eventually simmered down, and the Tar Heels won that game. But I mean, there's been controversies before where Coach Dean Smith had words with Rick Roby after a hard foul, and this was in 1977, and Roby said that Dean Smith was profane in his words, and of course Dean Smith denied it. So, there's been some spice in this rivalry over the years. Nothing quite like that in the last 20 years, but yeah. And I enjoyed digging into the past games, coming up with a couple of games in the 60s, including Dean Smith's second season, and turned up some nuggets that I didn't know before. So it was interesting.
Yeah, definitely go over to tarheeltribune.com and check out that. It is live on the site now, and you can go and check out that and kind of see some of these other ones. A lot of them now. Carolina leads the series 25-17 over Kentucky, and a lot of those wins came in the Dean Smith era. Of course, I mean the man coached over 40 years. I think Roy is over 500 in his career against Kentucky. I don't know what it was when he was at Kansas, but
No, he's not. He's
not
because of his time in Kansas, but he has a winning record against Kentucky at Carolina.
At Carolina, okay.
Yeah, 13 of the 25 wins were under Dean Smith. But what really irritates Kentucky fans is Carolina's the only program that's played Kentucky more than 10 times and has a winning record. And Kentucky takes pride in having a winning record against teams with multiple national championships, such as Indiana, Kentucky, UCLA, not Carolina. And then they've played in a regional final 4 times, and Carolina won 3 of them.
Well, that kind of brings us around to the one that is probably the freshest in everyone's memory. And to me, it's probably 2017 Final Four, Carolina, Kentucky, Elite Eight. I'm trying to think. The only game I could probably put above it in my lifetime is the Carolina Duke Final Four. I'm trying to think of something else in terms of how well that game was. Like it was a good game, and the flurry of the last 11 seconds or so of that game still sticks out in my head. Like every once in a while, it'll pop up on Twitter as like a anniversary. This is the Luke May day or whatever. But them not calling a timeout, coming down after Malik Monk hit that 3. Them not calling a timeout, Penson just driving down the court and finding Luke May, who Luke May in that tournament became a star in that tournament. Like we knew him as Carolina fans because we had seen him through the year, and people were questioning, why is this kid getting minutes? And we were all eager to be like, well, this is why he's getting minutes. He's doing this, he's doing that. he's all over the place. Like we didn't expect this either, but that game cemented him in Carolina lore with that shot. And then for him to follow it up the next year and become like the dude on the team, because that 2018 team, they were okay. And then 2019 was a 1 seed his senior year. So, yeah. So, I mean, he really followed it up. And that was one of the last true traditional Carolina teams that we've had in terms of 5-star freshmen, upperclassmen, guys off the bench that are role players and know what they're doing. You've got Roy on the bench. They're kind of running Carolina basketball. And that was something I wanted to talk about a little bit too, in terms of, I feel like this year's team is finally playing Carolina basketball. Like they haven't been playing it the past couple of years. It's been more ISO and like really short rotations. And looking at it now, because I think a lot of people were doubting Hubert and were like, well, he didn't know how to use his bench. He didn't know how to develop the bench. I think it was more he didn't like the bench. I think he just didn't want to play those kids. Like, I don't think it was more of a, well, I don't know what to do with him. I think he knew that he couldn't do anything with him and just chose to stay with his top 6 guys. And now the proof's in the pudding based on what we're seeing this year, where he's completely rebuilt this team through the transfer portal. Talk a little bit about what you've seen so far this season from Carolina in terms of the way Hubert has crafted this roster. Because I have some notes in terms of what he's done, like to fulfill certain roles that takes me back to previous Carolina teams with Dean and with Roy that I grew up watching. Whereas a certain kind of player that does a certain type of thing on a Carolina team, and if you've got 8, 9 of those slots filled in, you're going to probably be a top 10 team and ready to go. So explain to me, you being a lifelong Carolina fan yourself, have you caught that vibe that this kind of feels more like the traditional running up and down the court Carolina squad, or is this something brand new?
Yeah, this is more like your traditional team. However, you don't have the double low post as Dean Smith and Roy Williams had for years. You don't have that. You have more spacing than you had under Roy Williams or Dean Smith. So those are the differences. But this year you got the secondary break back. They're pressing more. And there's better ball movement than there was before. The ball doesn't stick like it did last season.
Yeah.
Sure does help to have Elliot Cadeau to help that happen. But, the ball moves better. They're playing better defense, and everybody's moving without the ball better, and it's just creating better shots. Now, if guys like Cormac Ryan could start making them more often, that would be helpful. But he was kind of streaky. He was kind of streaky at Notre Dame, so that's not a big surprise that he'll have bad games. But if he can be more consistent, my goodness, if he could have made 3 or 4 3-pointers against UConn, you never know what could have happened. But definitely it's a more entertaining game than the first 2 seasons under Hubert. And I think Harrison Ingram is the key added element that makes it all happen, because he can do so much. He can play the 4, he can play the 3, he can hit 3-pointers, he can drive, he can rebound, he can pass, he plays good defense. He just he does so many things. I mean, Brady Manick got so much credit, deservedly so, during the Final Four run, being the stretch 4 who could create open space and everything. But I think Harrison Ingram does that even better, and many more intangibles that really has helped Carolina this season.
I love the fact that once he recognizes someone is smaller than him, he will post them up like immediately. Like he will back them down and put them, he'll go back to the basket and post them up and score on them and do the little, too small thing and run back up the court. He kind of reminds me of if J.R. Reed could shoot threes. He kind of reminds me of J.R. Reed a little bit, in terms of like his body build and like his game inside. He rebounds, he can defend. I don't think anybody was expecting this from Harrison Ingram in terms of him coming in. Like he's an alpha. He's an alpha. And I don't think anybody was really expecting that. And in fact, I heard a lot of people kind of like, well, who's this kid? He came from Stanford, but I mean, how good can he be or whatever? Well, you're kind of seeing it. And honestly, Cormac Ryan's another one where I didn't expect a lot from him. I didn't know what to expect from him, but they fill these roles. And that's what I was talking about before, where in Carolina, to me, you have to have certain things to have a traditional Carolina team. At number one, you have to have a speedy point guard. They can handle the rock, can push the pace, can shoot, can score, can outrun a defense, and can stay out of foul trouble. You need somebody and can assist, keep the ball moving. You need somebody like that. That looks like it's Cadeau right now, because RJ is really more of an undersized shooting guard. But you really need somebody that can push it. And to your point, the past 2 years, they didn't have a guard like that. Caleb Love wasn't like that. He was more of a scorer. RJ, they tried him at that point for a little bit. He's not exactly it either. Cadeau is more like a Marcus Page, Joel Berry, Ty Lawson type of point guard that's going to get it down the court. He can create his own shot, and he's gonna assist. And he's leading the team right now in assists with 4.4 per game as a freshman. He's finally starting. At the 2, you need either somebody that's really athletic that can get to the cup and score in the paint, or you need somebody that can really shoot like from 3. But I'm kind of thinking like that Wayne Ellington, Theo Pinson type, where it's like they're lengthy, like they're long, they can guard on the perimeter. And that's Cormac Ryan as it is right now. Like when he went out and found a guy that kind of fit the description, and he can shoot. So I see that there. Harrison's the 3, and the small forward in the Carolina system is similar to the 2, but they're more prone to be in the paint. They might back you down. They might post you up. They can do a little bit of everything. They're probably going to guard the other team's best player, that kind of thing. And usually that 2 or 3 is probably the best player out of the 5 for Carolina, unless they just have a dominant center that year. Ingram in that 3 is kind of filling that role. And then I'm trying to think who's playing 4 right now.
Ingram's starting at the 4, but he's also playing the 3. And
because they got Cadeau in now at point, right? And then RJ's playing shooting guard.
Yeah, and Ryan at the 3.
Yeah, Ryan's at the 3, Ingram at the 4, Bacot at the 5. So, and then with Bacot, like you said, we're used to seeing like twin towers running up and down the court. There's like a dual big man type thing that they run at Carolina, and they kind of went away from that the past couple of years. But this kind of reminds me more of like when they would run a 2-man big man type thing, but one of them was a power forward, like a pure power forward, like like when Antoine Jameson was here. And he was one of the bigs, and he was the power forward. And what was it, Zerd Zwicker or whoever at center, I think, during those teams. He was the center, but they were still running up and down the court. And then you got to have a bench. You need 3 or 4 guys you can depend on, including a backup guard that can come in, and the pace isn't going to get slower if they come in, and you're going to still continue to score and swap people out. And the best Carolina teams have 9-10 dudes on it that you can use in rotation. How are you feeling this early in the season? Because we went from Hubert using 5.5 kids the past 2 years to this year where he's using 10, 11 kids, And as I'm going through the rotations, I'm like, there's guys on this team like Jalen Withers and stuff that started a couple of games, but they're mainly coming off the bench that have shown some signs that, hey, they can actually play.
Yeah, Jalen Withers it might be one of the more athletic players on the team, but he's just struggling to make a difference so far, and hopefully that'll come around. I mean, he obviously can as a physical driver of the basket, and he can do a lot of things, but it's just struggling right now. But for as far as the bench players, Seth Trimble has been the biggest surprise for me.
Yeah.
He doesn't look anything like the player we saw last season. Tough defense, making 3-pointers. I didn't see that coming. And just a good all-around floor game. And he comes in and brings energy. You talk about needing a good guard come off the bench. Boy, he's provided that. So he was kind of an afterthought at the start of the season, but he's firmly the sixth man right now.
Yeah, Trimble, he's one of the few that remained off of last year's team. My first thought when I saw him this year was he's been in the weight room. he's been lifting weights like this whole offseason because he's got a little bit more lift. He's going to the basket more violently. Like he's trying to some people forget this is JP Takoto's cousin. Like they're both from Minnesota, kind of similar games, just Seth is shorter. And but same
similar hops.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Seth's tried to embarrass a couple people already this season. But I do love his growth. And I know Dean always used to say that the biggest growth of a college basketball player that you'll see will be that offseason from freshman year to sophomore year. And I've always looked at that when I'm looking at Carolina players. And I'm like, okay, how much have they gone and grown from what we saw in freshman year to when we see them now? Seth's probably, I'm trying to think, would I say he's grown the most? He's actually in there at the end of games. Like where Hubert's running them, he's not starting them, but he's finishing the games out. So yeah, I guess he would be one of the top ones that have expanded and gotten better from season to season here. Let's do, before we do the quick preview of Carolina and Kentucky. Carolina is still in the top 10, 7-2 overall, 1-0 in the ACC. Kentucky's ranked 14th. They're 7-2 also. They have not played an SEC game yet. It's 5:30 p.m. on CBS. This Saturday. Carolina leads the all-time series 25-17. Players, storylines to watch this week. What are you looking at in terms of this game and then going into the next week? I'll check. I think they've got we got somebody right after them a couple days later. Oklahoma, the Jumpman class. Yeah,
and that's going to be a tough game. They're ranked 15 or 16, so that's going to be a very tough game.
It's like Tuesday next week, Tuesday or Wednesday.
The women's games. Let's see. The women's games Tuesday night against Oklahoma, and the men's games Wednesday night against Oklahoma.
Okay, so we got this game Saturday, that game Wednesday, then they got Christmas break, and then they'll be back. I think the week following. Give me, what's the one player or storyline that you're looking at after watching 9 games of this Carolina team so far? Compared to last year, I don't see a lot of Carolina fans complaining about what they're seeing when they look at what they went through last year. But is there somebody or ongoing storyline that you're looking at with Carolina as they take on Kentucky?
Well, I mean, you have to look at R.J. Davis. It's clearly his team, and that's no slight against Armando Bacot, who we come to find out in a conversation before the season told R.J. that this is his team. And he's embraced that, and he's really done well playing off the ball. And my goodness, last 3 or 4 games, he's just shooting well. He's passing well and playing good defense. And I don't know if I thought RJ would have a good season in a small sample size. We're not too far in the season, but I don't know that I saw RJ reaching this level this season. So that's been pretty impressive. I think going to the 2 and having Elliot Cadeau at point is really helping him out, and that's just quite a drastically different dynamic than when it was he and Caleb in the backcourt.
Yeah, because there was times. Now, granted, we don't know what happened last year. I know there was a lot of rumors and innuendo and all this stuff going on, but it got to a point, RL, where I remember watching games at the end of the year and specifically looking at Caleb and RJ like on the court and their interactions with each other. And I think it was a Wake Forest game or something where for the whole first half, Caleb was on one side of the floor and RJ was on the other side. And no matter what the other one was doing, the other one was on the other side of the floor. And it was like they weren't passing to each other. And I don't know if it was coincidence. It just happened to be the game I was watching that day and noticed it because I was intentionally looking at it. Or it was just, just the way it was. The offense wasn't all that great last year to begin with. But it felt like there was something there. Now, we never heard from either one of them if there was any kind of rift or anything like that, even after the fact. And Caleb has expressed his love for Carolina even after leaving. Hell, he's on the #1 team in the country right now, and he seems like he's in a better place and a better fit with Arizona than he would have been here in Carolina. But I agree, RJ Davis is a really good one. He's averaging, I think I saw like 27 points per game the past 5 games or something to that effect. Right. He's averaging 21 for the season. And it should be his team. He's a senior. Armando technically isn't supposed to be here. So it should be, it should be RJ's team at this point. I want to see, their starts have been pretty good this year so far. I want to see them kind of put a team out in the second half. That Tennessee game, for example, I don't think anybody expected them to drop 61 points on a top 10 ranked Tennessee team that's one of the best defensive teams in the whole country. And they did it with ease. Watching that, that's when I was really like, ooh, okay, Carolina might be back. If they're going to do this against Tennessee, this might be it. But then the second half, naturally, there was a little bit letting off the gas. We kind of expected that to kind of happen. But Tennessee shouldn't have scored 91. Tennessee didn't score that many points. That was alarming to me that they let them get back to the point where it was never in question. But to allow Tennessee to score 91 points was a little alarming. And then UConn as well, where it was just I think UConn just got to a point where they were able to keep them at arm's length, and it just stayed that way the whole second half. And I wouldn't say they got bullied, but it felt like UConn was a more experienced team together, I guess, maybe is a better way to put it. Defending national champions. So the 2 losses that Carolina has so far this year are not bad losses at all, and they're both on neutral spots, right? Because they lost to UConn and they lost to who was it, Arkansas? No, they beat Arkansas. Who did they lose to? It was UConn last week, and then the first loss was to it was overtime. Oh my gosh, I can't remember who it was. It was early in the year. I gotta go look for it.
It was in the Bahamas. They lost to Villanova.
Villanova, that's who it was. Okay.
Lost to Villanova.
And that was an overtime game.
Yeah,
it was an overtime game and a neutral site tournament type deal. So they haven't lost at home. They haven't really played at home. So yeah, I feel pretty good. Now again, I'm looking at their defense in the second half. That's a storyline I want to watch. I want to see them actually close the game out and actually do what they've been doing in the first halves and keep it going. I love Hubert using the full bench. I don't think necessarily, I keep hearing the announcers talking on and on about how they need to get Armando more involved. Armando's game is kind of you don't really necessarily have to run stuff for him. You do need to get the ball to him. But this team is built where last year, if you didn't get him the ball, they were going to lose. This year, they've had some games where Baycott wasn't really a factor scoring-wise, and they won anyway. So I don't know if he's as much of a factor going forward, although he's a preseason All-American. I don't know if it's going to finish the year that way. If anybody on this team is going to be that, it might be RJ Davis or Harrison Ingram, to be honest. Who do you think who showed you the most so far this season on this roster? Who have you been the most impressed with? Is it Ingram or RJ?
It probably 1A and 1B, those two right there. You were mentioning about second half. Now, I'll point out the Florida State game where they played very well in the second half. And of course, they were down big. But on the second half at UConn, we were talking about how Hubert Davis is expanding his rotation this year. But if you look at that UConn game, the starters and Trimble were the only ones who played more than about 7 minutes. And I'd have to wonder if there was that some of the players are getting tired at the end, kind of like against Kansas in the national championship game. And I'm really curious to see how Davis handles the rotation coming up after seeing how things went against UConn. In the post game, I actually asked him about that. He just said that, he put the players in he thought gave them the best chance to win. He didn't really explain why he only played 6 guys. But I think that could be a factor as far as endurance for some of these starters if they're going to be playing such heavy minutes in the games coming up.
This matchup Saturday, another top 10 or top 15 matchup for Carolina early in the season. I love the fact that Carolina leaves Chapel Hill in November and December, and they go out and play in these tournaments, or they'll go to somebody's house. Like they went to Wofford. They'll go to these other places over the past couple of years. They like to go in state a lot too, which I really enjoy. Who do you think is the one guy they need to keep an eye on from Kentucky on Saturday? If you're a Carolina fan coming into this matchup and you don't have the clue as to what Kentucky is or who's on there or any of that, what do you think? Who do you think? Because I was looking at their roster and I forgot Robert Dillingham was over here. He's leading them in assists right now. He was a kid that they were looking at as maybe a one and done to the NBA.
Right. Well, I mean, there are a few of them, but I'll single out Reed Sheppard, 6'3" freshman. He leads the country in three-point shooting percentage, 59%.
Oh my! Who? I mean, say that again. Who's Reed Sheppard?
And Dillingham, who's by the way from Hickory, he's shooting 51%, and as a team, they're 5th in the country at 41%. So perimeter defense, which has not always been a strong point, has got to be good. In Kentucky's 2 losses, they did not shoot well from the perimeter, so that seems to be pretty important element of success for the Wildcats. The other part is Carolina's going to have to keep them out of transition. If you saw their blowout of Miami, they got out in transition a lot, and that's that. But see the other part of it, when Carolina's gotten out in transition, they forced turnovers, but Kentucky leads the country in assist to turnover ratio. So it's going to be harder to create turnovers against the Wildcats. So they better rebound. They better limit Kentucky to one shot, or that you can't get that transition game going like they did, for example, against Florida State.
I was not aware that Kentucky's freshmen were shooting like this. Jay Billis actually has Reed Sheppard as his number 1 freshman in the country right now. And an article he put out basically saying that he's the most complete player that Kentucky has. So watch out for him. Number 15, like you said, RJ's also averaging 4.6 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 3 steals, and just under 1 block per game for Kansas. So I mean, not Kansas, Kentucky. So he's really doing his thing. Rob Dillingham is a projected top 10 NBA draft pick. This is a Calipari team that's, we're used to thinking of Kentucky, especially the past 10 years or so, as just super young, no vets. Depending on the talent level of the freshmen that came in will determine where Kentucky goes. And this feels like a Kentucky team where they've got those freshmen in there in that number 1 class, but they've got some guys that have stuck around. So they're a little older too. And it feels like if Carolina, like you said, they not usually, but a lot of times they have problems defending the perimeter. If they can't defend the perimeter in this game early and Kentucky gets out early, I know we saw Carolina come back against Florida State, but Florida State ain't Kentucky. Like they're not the same level of talent. So while I wouldn't mind seeing how Carolina reacts in that situation in terms of trying to come back, I don't want to see them in that situation. Like I don't want them down 11 to Kentucky with 8 minutes to go in the first half, like because somebody's hit like 4 threes or whatever already. And it feels like that happens to Carolina a lot, where it'll be some random dude. Usually it's in the Smith Center. So at least we're not in the Smith Center. But you know where I'm going with this. Usually some random dude who comes in and has the game of his life. He'll hit like 8 threes. He'll have like 35 points. Who was the kid? Dalton Neck that came in and scored like 37, twisted his ankle right there at the end of the game.
Right.
And they just couldn't stop him. Like, especially the second half, they could not stop this kid. He was all over the place. And I want to say there was another one from Wofford a year or two ago that came in the Smith Center and was just dropping threes from everywhere. Like, and I'm just like, why does this always happen to Carolina? Like, why is it always us? And why is it always at home? Like, it feels like somebody comes in here and just it'll be somebody that like.
And then the thing about Kentucky, it's not just one guy you got to look out for.
Yeah, it's 3 or 4. So it's like, do we have enough horses to guard all that? And actually, I think we do. You know, this is really the first time. This is really the first time since 2019 where I felt like Carolina has a team that can compete nationally and go. Even the run in 2021, 2022, that was more. They got hot. Like, we watched that team all year. Like, we knew what they were. Like, we knew exactly what they were. And they just got the last 2 weeks of the regular season and then the ACC tournament. And then once they got in the tournament, the bracket kind of fell a certain way. Caleb Love got hot. RJ got super hot. And if it wasn't for Baycott twisting his ankle or tweaking it for like the umpteenth time, in that Kansas game, things might be a little different. But that team, I didn't feel like they were supposed to win the national championship. I was just along for the ride. Like, this was unexpected. It's kind of like 2000 Carolina, the Joe Forte team that made it to the Final Four. We didn't expect them to get to the Final Four. Like, they were 8th seed, like, just like that one. It's like, what are we doing here? But we enjoyed the ride. This team, I'm actually looking at it and I'm going, okay, my regular expectations for Carolina are back in place. Like, everything that I love about Carolina, things I expect to see from Carolina, I'm seeing those things again. So I'm having that expectation. So if this was last year's team taking on Kentucky in a neutral spot, I would probably pick Kentucky just from seeing that team together for 2 or 3 years. But this year, I'm gonna go with the Heels, but I think it's going to be a tight game for most of it. These two teams seem like they match up pretty well with each other. How are you feeling going into it?
I think Carolina will match up with them well if they can limit them on the perimeter. Maybe get a scouting report from UNC-W.
Right.
I don't know how the Seahawks won in Lexington, but I think Carolina has a good chance. The thing that they don't have a lot of video on is this 5-star 7-1 freshman Aaron Bradshaw. He's only been with them 2 games. But in the last game, he had 17 points, 11 rebounds, 3 blocks, and he was crazy good. So Armando has gone. The last game he dealt with 7-2 Donovan Clingan, and now he might not start, but Bradshaw's going to be in there a lot. 7-1 with a massive wingspan,
clanging and banging.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy inside for Armando for sure.
So 5:30 Saturday night, Carolina, Kentucky. Carolina's ranked 9th in the country. Kentucky's 14th. It kind of feels like it's setting up as whoever wins this game is going to be like that breakout team going forward because we're about to hit conference play and everything else. It's going to set it up really nice for whoever wins to break into the top 8 and kind of go from there. And then after that, did we say Tuesday or Wednesday? Was the Wednesday. So Wednesday is the Oklahoma game. So we may wait until Thursday to do the next episode because at that point we'll be closer to Christmas break and everything else, and they would have got both these games out the way. We can review them both at that point too. And again, if you're watching or you're seeing this for the first time, we'll be on each week throughout the season, just kind of keeping up with Carolina basketball, what we're seeing, especially as we get into ACC play. Duke was picked to win the ACC, but they've looked a little shaky the past couple of weeks. Miami's up there. Virginia's always sniffing around up there. Clemson, surprisingly, is up there, although maybe not so much of a surprise based on last year. So there's some.
No, I think Clemson's legitimate. I think you're looking at Carolina, Miami, and Clemson as the best teams coming in. We'll see how it shakes out when we really get into the league season. But I would discount Miami's game at Kentucky. I think they're really good, and that was just a one bad game for them.
Jim Larinaga going into the portal and building squad and keeping kids too with NIL now. So like that's an added benefit for them. So we're going to see all these teams before the year's over with. But we're going to get out of here for this inaugural edition of Bleav in Heels Hoops. Again, the audio can be found on the Bleav Podcast Network. Make sure you go and rate and subscribe there. The video can be found at Tobacco Road's YouTube channel, youtube.com/@Tobacco Road Sports Radio. If you subscribe, you'll get a notification from when we're about to go live, so you can make plans, get set up, get some popcorn ready, and go. We plan on bringing in some guests, some surprises, some former players. You never know who might pop up in here, so we'll get to work on that for you guys. And just appreciate everybody that's stopped by and said hello, or when we put the announcement out, said this is great and that kind of thing. So me and R.L. will try our best to temper our fandom and give you facts on what's going on with the Heels. And thank you, R.L., for doing this with me, because I've been doing the Bleav in Panthers podcast for 4 years, and I write for All Hornets for Sports Illustrated. So it's been really rough for me. It's been so hard. Like, just
this has got to be a little bit more joyful than the Panthers podcast.
Oh, dude, this is like vacation. Like, this is heaven right now. I can actually talk about a team I like that's actually playing well, and like it just, like, especially Carolina, the Panthers. I don't know what's happening now. Like, it's just dissolved into just trash. Like, I don't know what it is. And then Charlotte just can't stay healthy. Like, the Hornets just cannot stay healthy to save themselves. So it's Tar Heels. Tar Heels are my savior yet again. And this happened before. When it was 2016, 2017, we were going through it, and Carolina was the only thing I had like the whole season to be like, yeah, that's my team. So I still wear all the sweatshirts proudly. But we'll be back next week, probably after the Oklahoma game. So it'll probably be Thursday, I would imagine. We'll probably get on and do that there. But again, rate, subscribe. We'll be back next week with episode number 2. You've been watching and listening to Bleav in Heels Hoops here on the Bleav Podcast Networks, presented by Bet Online. Keep at it.
All right. Talk to you next week.